So welcome everyone to the first forum of January and of the new year. All these good old faces here. And I was wearing a mask today to protect myself. As you know, there's a lot of flu out there. This new flu A is, we don't have carry a lot of immunity to it. The Tamiflu will be effective against it. So if you feel like you have the flu, get yourself tested either with an at-home test or with your doc and start Tamiflu unless you have, but you should talk to your doc about that because there are some tricks to using that also. I'm wearing a mask to protect myself, not because I'm ill today. So today we have these esteemed older colleagues, familiars. It was supposed to be Corey in person, but Corey's not feeling well, so she's not in person. Mary, I'm not sure why she's delayed, and also John and Nancy Brown. So 5 years ago, DUPC, the transition team, surveyed the congregation and discovered many fascinating and a few seemingly contradictory convictions. Now, a session committee has begun a Presbytery-approved search for our next pastor. And prominent in the ministry discernment profile is this phrase, quote, "The pastor is expected to have a strong progressive theological background," unquote. So how do we get to expressing that need? Corey from the transition team, as well as Nancy, John, and Mary from the search committee, the current search committee, will lead an interactive conversation with all in attendance as we seek unity while pursuing the right pastor for us. And then in the next couple of weeks, we'll be taking up this question of progressive Presbyterianism as well. Next week, conveying progressivism through music, and that'll be Lee Wright. January 18th, we'll have presenters from Third Presbyterian talking about the social gospel and More Light, 130 years of progressivism at Third Presbyterian Church. And then a slightly tangential, Windsor on January 25th, we'll talk about from integrating water fountains to marching on Washington, one man's progressive Presbyterianism. All right, you guys. Are you okay? Okay.
So progressivism is not a new concept for this church, but in the past year, I think we were able to put into words some of what that means to us. And you can see on the screen our mission statement. The Downtown United Presbyterian Church is a more light church that pursues spiritual seeking and social justice ministry. And then we followed that with our just cause statement. We live into Jesus' inclusive call to love every person, care for creation, and work for God's justice. And you can see this picture was taken out in front of the church early in December when there was a vigil for Casi Bocanegra's dad, Omar. As I said, can we go to the next one? I'm sorry. I don't know where we are. Yeah. Oh, great. As I said, this is not a new concept for us. You can see the banner in back of me, and there is my poor ragged work shirt that I wear when I'm working in the yard in the summer. And this statement, "We are passionate, progressive, and personal," was a tagline and a logo that we used for a while. Judith Foster was heading up this team that came up with this logo and this statement about who we were. I don't know if you have other words that you would add to this. We are slowly adding to it ourselves, and I believe that's what this morning is really about. What does progressivism mean to us?
Thank you. One of the things that I felt really helpful recently in helping me think about progressivism, and which actually gave me a new understanding for myself, was an article by Nicholas Kristof, who's a columnist in the New York Times. And he wrote an article about what would Jesus think if he were here at Christmas time. Um, and of course, I think it was partially in response to the many churches that found a new way of displaying the manger scene and reminding people of what many of us believe, and what Christoph would also say is the central message that Jesus was bringing to us, which is that the ethical heart of Jesus's message centered on compassion, humility, and care for the poor and the marginalized. And in the article, Christoph reminds us that these values are clashing a lot now with political rhetoric and with a lot of social priorities. Christoph said in the article that Jesus would have been surprised at how we're celebrating his birthday and the commercialism, of course, but also he would have been surprised at how his message has been misunderstood and implemented in so many ways in our world. The part of what he said that gave me a new understanding of my own faith. He talked about how important the stories are of Jesus, and that it's not necessarily a matter of whether they're true or not, but the fact is that the birth story, and I would say also the resurrection story, have had a tremendous impact on cultures throughout the world and have inspired people for generations. And this was the part that was so helpful to me, his saying how meaningful the stories are, and that it doesn't matter whether you believe they're true or not, they can still have tremendous value for them. Much of my own faith journey over the years centered on, do I believe this or don't I believe this? And about 20 years ago, I came to the conclusion that I may never answer those questions, but I clearly have a deep faith and belief in the teachings of Jesus and how important they can be in my own life. So what I took from what Christoph was saying was just a new way of treasuring the stories, and for me, progressivism means that I can be comfortable with the fact that I don't believe it happened, but I believe that the stories are important and significant, and that you may believe that they happened, and that that's what's important, and that in spite of the fact that we may have different ways of expressing our faith, that we can share our spiritual community and worship together. So for me, a real important piece of progressivism is a questioning, but it's also an acceptance that we come at our faith and our belief in different ways, and that it's not the differences that are important, it's the commonality of community.
Corey, I don't want to put you on the spot, but as you were part of the transition team, I know progressivism was one of the core values that you were discussing with the congregation. And I wondered if you had any other thoughts on progressivism.
I think one of the things that we found surprising after getting everyone's responses was the wide variety of beliefs. And I've still been thinking about this. We had some more conservative, traditional values, and on one end of the spectrum, and some very, very liberal stuff on the other end. My takeaway now, having had a little bit of space, is that the more traditional, I'm using traditional and conservative. I don't necessarily have a definition for those, but that our progressivism has been acceptable to even the most to the more conservatives in our congregation. But we've also had an exodus of progressives. And so then there's the balancing act. So I've been asking myself, like where is the middle ground? If our progressive ideas are collectively what we believe as a church, then we need to stick with those. I've also found from listening to other congregations who have been trying to find their footing that we have always been very progressive. And probably the height of that would be when we had two worship services, one that was more traditional in structure, and then the C2 service where it was more interaction and conversation. And that the C2 service is what some congregations are leaning into as their new progressivism. And I kept thinking to myself, well, we've had it all this time. Like, what is the what's the takeaway? And I felt like some of our leadership was trying to get us to try something new, but to me, trying new, leading away from our progressivism, felt it made me sad, I guess. This is a little out of order, but one thing I wanted to make sure to say is that really leaning into the concept of for all, and to know that people are going to come into the church building with preconceived ideas and experiences that are maybe more conservative. And so we have to meet people like where they are. And then, but also that shouldn't stop us from momentum forward, keeping going to the long history of where we've been. I'm going to stop talking now, but I want to come back to at some point, if somebody can remind me from the lunch that we had with the panel that talked about how the churches joined. I learned something it changed everything for me to learn how the united part got in there. If somebody can remind me in a little bit to talk about that. My conclusion for this right now is that, we have to kind of sit in the dissonance of that we all come from different places, different cultures, different experiences, and to accept those while also still doing what we think is right in terms of following Jesus's what he said to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Corey.
This is the slide I'm supposed to speak to. I want to start by pointing out that that progressive is used as a modifier for both the word theology, theologically progressive, and it's also used as a progressive socially or politically. And while we embrace both, I think it's important to be clear which we're talking about at any particular time. And it was our failure to talk about what we mean by progressive theology that I think created a couple mismatches in our recent pastoral relationships. Because progressive theology is pretty important to us. And so I want to spend a little bit more time saying what I mean by that, and I think what we mean when we talk about progressive, or what we expect or hope for when we ask our pastor to be progressive theologically. And also, I want to be sure that I touch upon the bounds of that, where it rubs up against Presbyterianism. Because we attempt to be progressive Presbyterians, and some others in the presbytery have been inclined, well, I've heard rumors about how radical we are, and have started to push back against us, and I think we need to be aware of that. So I'll touch on that as well. So our expectations theologically certainly involve the careful use of language, especially as it relates to describing the Godhead and avoiding describing God as male and using male terms. Carolyn gave me for Christmas Nancy Merrill's translation of the Psalms. And that is an exquisite example of someone who has gotten past the pitfalls and traps of male language and how to describe experience of the divine and the holy without falling into that. But another linguistic place where we at Downtown have rubbed up against other Presbyterians and some of our pastors is around the use of the word Lord. We have been careful in our use of that word, in part because of its historical and sociological associations with slavery and master-slave relationships, the lord of the house, the master. And we've attempted to use language that has not encumbered with that baggage of history. And so we struggle with how to speak about the Godhead in where are the bounds of language that we're comfortable with. And that's an ongoing quest that we'll struggle with for years to come, I think. In response to a couple people in the presbytery that were concerned about were we in apostasy, had we gone too far? I wrote an essay about God language and the Lord challenge, and at some point I'll share that with you all. I don't think this is probably the right forum for that, but it's worth exploring further, perhaps. other dimensions of what we mean by progressivism. The holy and truth continue to be revealed through authors in every age. I think we look for and experience inspiration, revelation in a variety of sources that were written after the canon was solidified 2,000 years ago. And we're not averse to including other readings and authors in our liturgies, and I think that's as it for us, that's as it should be. And so people like, oh, I'm going back.
Mary Oliver.
Mary Oliver, John O'Donohue, other inspirational authors, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Dalai Lama, the list can go on.
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King. And so we're open to those sources of inspiration. And I think the fact that some of those authors identify as Christian and some don't, it is not a barrier to our looking, because I think we're more inclined, or let me say it the other way. We're less inclined to insist that our way is the only way. And that we allow space for others to hold truths and to seek God in ways that differ from ours. And that's okay. And that's where we begin to rub up against the edges of Presbyterianism. But at the end of the day, I would also assert where Mary did, that we identify as Christian, we identify ourselves as followers of Jesus Christ. That is a way that resonates and holds truth for us. Is that the only way? I would not be so insistent on that point, but I would affirm that that I and we are Christians, that we take our lead and our inspiration from the teachings, the life, the pattern of Jesus as he lived his life and as the ways in which Jesus pointed to God. Do you say any more? I think I can stop
No,
there for the
I was just going to say, I personally have started using the term Jesus follower rather than the word Christian. I follow Jesus' love actions. I follow the way Jesus moved through the world. Do I believe all of the stories about the manger and walking on the water? And not necessarily, but I believe in the way he lived his life. So I have recently started considering myself as a Jesus follower.
Are those the words that Bonnie Lloyd used too? I'm trying to remember how Bonnie Lloyd termed it. Were those the words? Does anybody remember? It was something like, it was very close to that. But she was, I think, one of the first persons in our congregation that I heard express it that way.
Hey, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have this page with John's explanation, and I'm remembering conversations that we had in the transition team about, yeah, our progressivism. And to be honest, when I've gone to other churches, I mean, we still have a fairly traditional structure of worship. Um, and that can change depending on who's leading. But people have had, I don't know, this kind of, to me, mind-boggling idea of what it meant for the downtown progressives. And we absolutely do like the democratic process of being Presbyterian, like the Book of Order. It might sound crazy, but I enjoyed like learning about it um and fine tuning what we were doing. And also, yeah, we probably do live on the edges, but we are not um as progressive as people were thinking. Just because we accept that other people have beliefs, or like, for my personal beliefs are multifaceted. Um, but that doesn't exclude being a Jesus follower. And I think that just to piggyback, that the transition team found exactly what you're saying, that that we do still follow all of these things, and we enjoy being Presbyterian. We didn't have to stick with that path, but it is something that brings us structure and comfort. And there are other progressive churches out there, and in different ways. Yeah, my mind went blank, so I'll stop there. Thanks for letting me jump in there.
I did want to pick up one additional place where the bounds of Presbyterianism get defined and enforced, if you will, and that is we're going to experience it today. When we do services of ordination and installation for our officers, there's a series of questions that Presbyterians are expected to affirm. Some of us affirm those with our fingers crossed behind our backs. Some of us say with God's help. But just before our most recent ordination, blanking her name, Deb Swift sent out a kind of an annotated version of the questions with her understanding that was extremely helpful. And so
It just went to those people who were being ordained.
But we could send it out more broadly.
Yeah, I did send it to you, Elaine. Didn't you get it from me?
I haven't read it. I mean, yeah, it's probably one of the 600.
Yeah. We could send it out more broadly to eConnect. It's
Are you all interested in seeing?
Maybe I still want to join any.
I've seen it before, but I agree that
Should I send it out on eConnect?
I'd like to see both the original and the modified.
Well, the originals are there, but she gives her commentary on each of the questions. That's extremely helpful. But the other point, what's it mean to be Presbyterian? At the beginning of the Book of Order, there's a section called Foundational Principles. And one of those foundational principles is that God alone is Lord of the conscience, and there are things upon which people of good faith can disagree. And so that we have to remember that that's at the foundation of how Presbyterians speak to one another and give grace to one another. And that we are within the Reformed tradition, reformed and always reforming. And so that the final truth may never be known in our lifetimes, but there is always more truth to be revealed.
Could I just add that I'm very pleased that this has come up because it is the reason that I'm not a deacon
Yeah.
now, and I still hurt from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think Deb's writing, I think, gives us room to let go of some of that. To be able to say those.
Changing what we say or agree to when we're taken into.
I mean, short of an overture, I don't think those questions are going to change.
It doesn't change the questions.
But it changes what we understand them to be pointing to.
It gives us a way of interpreting those questions that can be more comfortable to what we believe. It's a way of broadening the interpretation.
And I'm delighted that this has come up because I went and looked at the Auburn Affirmation and at the Confession of 1967. And I think this is somewhere in the Confession, but in the Auburn Declaration, it was that the supreme guide in the interpretation of scriptures is not ecclesiastical authority, but the Spirit of God speaking to the Christian believer. And in the Confession of 67, it talks about the church has an obligation to approach the scriptures with literary and historical understanding. And it actually, the church revised the Confession of 67 to have more inclusive language so that there's a precedent for this sort of thing. I think it would be not a bad thing if we could pressure Presbyterian Church nationally to be more open in revising this language, emphasizing it more. I think a lot of people stay away from the church because they can't believe that Jesus was risen from the dead, and it keeps a lot of people away. And I think I would love to see a statement from our church that it is not necessary to believe this specific thing, that specific thing. It's acceptable. It have to round the wording off better, but that we're open to a wide variety of theological beliefs. And I've been delighted with how this conversation has gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to talk about what we believe. It's harder to change what the national organization does and says. That's a longer process, but doesn't mean we can't try at some point.
Well, you're really getting at the heart of some of the things that I've been struggling with. I don't know whether anybody follows Ezra Klein. He had, I think, his most recent podcast was with a Buddhist, and the issue that he took on was certainty. Religion has almost become synonymous with certainty. And I've had in the back of my mind, and I think my red flags go up when I hear people talking about the truth. So that brings me to a thought that I'd like to share, and that is, what do we really expect from religion? When we talk about being a part of a faith community, what is that? And I would say for my own purposes, it would be increasing my understanding. And you mentioned the stories of our own Christian faith, yield to that understanding. But if the beliefs are hardened, and we're living in a world that is described by something in the millennium, we need to adapt to our new understanding of the world. Bob has mentioned why people aren't coming to church, and I don't know as I have a good answer for all of the reasons. There's great competition for time. I get more excited about watching the Buffalo Bills than I do sitting in a worship service. All of those things are at play. Lots of demands on what we are expected to do in our regular secular life. The church does not have a method or a process by which people can come from wherever they are to where they would like to go. And so I think I want to stop there because this can go on for quite a while. Thank you.
Do you want more questions or do you have more presentation?
I think the next,
Because she's.
I think we've moved right on to this, so let's keep going.
Last night I was just talking with my son about, he wanted to know how our church was different from other churches or the same as other Presbyterian churches. And so we were talking about that, and one of the things I brought up was not using the word progressivism, but that our church was more active oriented in terms of social justice. And then I brought up that a Presbyterian church is reformed and reforming, but then I have to confess, I don't exactly know what that means. And so maybe one of you who are way more knowledgeable than me can kind of define what that means.
I think a perfect example of that was that all may freely serve.
Can you speak
I
up?
think a perfect example of always reforming is that all may freely serve. That at one point, LGBT practicing non-repentant LGBT people were not allowed to be ordained. Thus, Janie Spar, that all may freely serve, and UPS, unrepentant practicing singers. So I think what we're talking about right now, is there a way that we could allow people to answer, to provide a different answer to that ordination question? I think that's always reforming.
And Janie Spar did far more good being out in the country, in the entire country, speaking to everybody, and not necessarily about GLBTQ plus issues. People flocked to her because she listened to them and she loved them and she understood them. And it was so exciting to see that. But I'm so excited to be here today to hear this conversation, because for such a long time, I had no idea what anybody else felt, and I felt I was an outlier and shouldn't really be here. But I didn't tiptoe around. But nevertheless, this is the kind of discussion that I wish we could have frequently, because it does help us understand one another as well as what we believe. Thank you.
In thinking about this, and one of you mentioned the wide breadth of people that we appeal to, and we don't all believe the same thing, or we reach out to. And it just occurred to me, we can't be all things, and maybe this is part of the progressive, in very simple language. We cannot be all things to all people, but I think we can offer some things to all people. And what makes me think of this is the contrast, the opposite ends. Most of you know Laura, and at one point when I was frustrated, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, about something, she said, oh, and she loves Downtown Church and always has and is still a member. Oh, well, the thing is, we are not really Presbyterian. Downtown Church is not really Presbyterian. That's why I love it. I mean, that's, the experience that she had, that she didn't have to say, I don't know what she said when she was an elder, but somehow she got by it or decided not to question it back in 1991 or whenever it was. At the other end of the spectrum is our new family. They wanted to be Presbyterian. They come from Sudan. They were Presbyterians in Sudan. Their church still means, and their church is not a building. Martha has shown me videos of the church gatherings, and they're dancing and they're singing and they're circling around and they're joyful. Imagine being joyful in South Sudan. But this is church. And when I drove some of them out to Saint's Place, from where they were living, she saw our church steeple and she goes, that's our church. Now, I'm sure they are much more conservative in terms of their theological beliefs. We've been more concerned about whether they're getting assistance with heating and getting their rent payment in on time or getting help with it than we have had theological conversations. But just knowing what I know and that we probably seem very different to them, and why wouldn't we? But we speak to the independent young woman that Laura has always been, and now independent, a little bit older woman, and the family that wants to be here, and they want to be here. And part of it is because we are Presbyterian and because they are welcomed into a Presbyterian liturgy, a Presbyterian community, and they feel loved. They feel so loved, especially this season, by this community. So we have all of this. And to me, that's part of what it means to be progressive, that there really is room and a welcome for all. And we didn't ask them what they believe. We just said, welcome. And we haven't said to Laura, well, and I hope she doesn't mind my, using her as an example. Well, if you can't check off this list, you're better look elsewhere. And Ted coming back Christmas Eve, and he wanted to be the liturgist because this church speaks to this 49-year-old man, still speaks to him and offers something that may be somewhat intangible even, but it's community, it is tradition, it is ritual, it is some of what a middle-aged man needs in the kind of world that he and all find themselves in. So I guess gone on longer than I meant to, but that we have the present, that there really is room for all of this and that, is tangential to what Elaine said. There needs to be room for all of us. And that to me is progressivism.
When I first came here, I had to be interviewed, and Gail Ricciuti interviewed me to become a member. And I thought, oh, that almost turned me off. I thought, what do I have to do? other than just coming to church. But I persisted and I always sat in the back. And then Vera Polly came up and said, would you like to be a deacon? And I asked her what that is. But that was, I don't know, does that turn people off? Are we still interviewed to become a member?
No.
When did that stop? Yeah, right. Just wanted to say that.
In the mid-90s, I was interviewed but I believe it took place in the chapel and all of the elders were there and we were all interviewed. Yeah.
Sometimes we've described ourselves, or some of us have described ourselves as Presbyterians on the way to Unitarianism. And for me, I'm very comfortable in Unitarian services and I find them meaningful. However, I miss Jesus and I miss God. And yeah, so I'm not sure there is another church like us. I mean, maybe there is, and somebody can tell me where it is and where it exists, but I so appreciate that we are both. And during the time that Lori was here with us, she reminded us of a lot of Presbyterian things that I found helpful, in some ways strengthened the part of my faith that is Presbyterian, but it still hangs out there in this other place that we've been talking about. So I'm concerned about whether we have enough people to continue as a church. I think we need to start saying that, as we meet with candidates. We've certainly been as honest and transparent as we can be about our situation. But I want to see us really try to be a small church with a pastor. We really haven't done that yet. And I think it's possible that that we might be able to do that. I am hoping that's the case. But in any case, I think we need to keep talking, not just about what we believe, but about whether we are a vital's not the right word, and I can't think of the word I mean, but anyway, whether we are a congregation, whether we are a church that can continue to exist and do good in the world as we have been. I do feel that we are unique in some way that I would like to see preserved.
There is a group, John and Mary and I are on a committee looking for a stated supply at this time. So this conversation is really important to our understanding of what we're looking for.
Does that move us into the job description? You want to move it to the next slide? Oh, you are there. Okay, great. Our job description that we've been working with candidates, and I think, John wrote in the newsletter, and hopefully you all saw that, first of all, we have candidates, and which is wonderful, because we've been told that it's a pastor's market. It's not a church's market right now. It's a pastor's market. It's kind of like the housing market, whether it's the seller or the buyer. We used a lot of the former job description when we did this, but I think the most important change we made, and I want to draw your attention to it, was talking about desired characteristics. And these, first of all, these characteristics came after this session had had some really significant and profound discussions about what had worked in the past and what hadn't worked in the past, and what that meant in terms of what we're looking for. And then we came up with these desired characteristics, and then we tried to look at the job description and be sure that it coincided with them and supported them. And you notice the first thing that's here is a collaborative style of leadership. The second is relational with congregation and community. And those two things were not necessarily what we've said that we're looking for in the past. And, you know, and we came to a realization that this really is probably the most important thing that we can look for. And I wonder if either the two of you want to say something more about that, because I think we want you to know that this is central to what we're looking for as we talk with candidates.
Yeah, and I think that aligns with the being clear what we mean by progressive, so that we find a pastor who will embrace and love us for who we are, instead of trying to change us into what they think we ought to be, you know, correct our apostasy or something, which is a little bit what we experienced in our last two pastoral relationships. Pastors who were trying to fix us instead of pastors who were willing to love us.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested, I mean, I can talk some more about the job description, but I think this is the most important thing. And I wonder if people would react to it. What thoughts do you have?
I'm very comfortable with the direction that you're taking on this. But I would like to comment on one of your last comments, Mary. I'm not discouraged about us being small, but I do feel that we have to be clearer about how we want to meet the public that is looking for a faith community, but hasn't found it. And what we, I think, have said around the table is that we are open to quite a variety of faith beliefs. For my own personal, I think I seek understanding, and that changes, if not daily, yearly, as I learn more. And how can this congregation be supportive of that kind of thing for people who are looking for a faith community? And that may require us to think differently. We'll have certain objectives as a congregation, serve justice, et cetera, taking care of our own people. But we have assets that can be put to use. But we need clarity around what it is that we want to accomplish and the direction we want to take. And I think that would be worth a discussion.
Other comments? Bob has one.
To me, the greatest strength of this congregation has been caring, both on an individual, personal level, as through deacons and well beyond, but also for the community at large and for the country at large. And I think that's above all any individual intellectual theological understanding. It's the level of care.
So that sort of leads us to next steps, and John's going to speak to that.
we've identified 3 candidates that we're in conversation with. Each of them drawn to us by who, and drawn to who we are. And so that's encouraging. But each offering very different gifts and very different experiences. And so the session is going to interview Monday night, Tuesday night, and then the following Monday, each of those 3 candidates. And then we will prayerfully consider who is the best person to invite to enter into ministry with us. But I invite your prayers for session during this time of discernment, because it's not clear. I could be convinced that any one of those 3 is the best person for us at this time. They have different gifts.
Can I can I say a couple things?
Sure.
The thing I learned from the panel was that when the church is united, there wasn't I'm not going to say there wasn't integration, but it seems like it was a necessity and it happened, and then people moved on. And at first I was like, oh, well, this explains a lot. And today I think that is how it worked for so long. So my suggestion might be, what if there were 1/3, you have a full-time job, you have 3 candidates. If they all fit, maybe they would be willing to have a 1/3 job. That's my suggestion. And I'm gonna say why also, because experiencing growing up with, well, we had 4 pastors, but 2 for the price of 1. It offered stability in my church life that I have never had again. And I wouldn't have said this except for recently, that having one person in charge did not work, in my opinion. But you have to have collaborators. That's the key word that I heard you say on the job description.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Yes.
Mine is just a quick procedural question. After the interviews with session, ultimately, whose decision will it be? The full session or the 3 of you?
The session.
Okay, so there will be, what, 7 people?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all
I haven't heard anything said about we need to attract families with young people if we're going to keep on going as a church, because those families will become like Corey and others, but we need families.
Do you have some ideas of how to do that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. The thing is, I think that having families attracts families. So if you don't, it's difficult to do that. I mean, I do think there are churches. I would say that the Unitarian Church on Winton Road is attracting kids.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there may be others that are as well, but the most common factor for attracting is families that are already there, and So we have a very small amount of that. We have 2 families.
Katie Jo was saying that to us, that you can and will attract what you have, what you are. But there's lots of progressive, socially conscious retirees out there who would love to be, who are ripe candidates for being welcomed into our midst. And that's sustainable too.
I mean, and it means we need to do all we can to support the families that we do have. And we have a new baby that's going to be born into our congregation, thanks to Robin. It's time.
Last words?
I feel very hopeful right now, and I hadn't felt like that for a while, but I feel very hopeful. I have seen the outpouring of generosity to our family, to Joseph, to one another, that it feels like that was missing for a while. It was like we were hunkered down, and so we were looking so inward. And it feels like that mold has been broken, and I feel very hopeful.
And I want to thank John and the whole worship team for the wonderful people who have been coming in to lead our worship on Sunday mornings. And it has just, for me, it has felt like a time of getting back to who we really are. And and that we're keeping that in mind. That's what we want to build on, is this feeling that has, for us at least, been part of this period of time from last spring, the last 8 months or so.
And the other piece is the Leap of Faith team that is working so hard to make this resource, this building resource, into something for the community. And that feels very hopeful to me. It's been a long haul, but Carol has been wonderful leading us forward. And I feel like that's a lot of what has given me hope, is that we're continuing to follow that dream, that star.
Signed on for 3 months.
Yeah, I'll bet. But the other important part of that is that came from the realization that the building drags us down. Because it takes so much time and effort on the part of members. And if we were less involved with that, we could be more involved in mission and in the community, et cetera. So it's for the community, but it's really the idea. It's for us to make it easier for us to be a church and to be the kind of church we want to be.
Thank you.
Speaking up from Zoom, if I may.
John, you didn't get a chance to say one more thing. Did you want to? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Work you're doing. And it is work.